What would you do if you discovered your own mother had been sabotaging your relationship with your sister for months? And what if you found out she'd been doing it during the one time you were trying to help plan the most important day of your sister's life? Today, I'm going to tell you how I uncovered a web of lies that nearly destroyed my family and how the truth came out in the most unexpected way. This is my story. When my mom looked me in the eye and accused me of sabotaging my sister's wedding, my world shattered. Not because of what she said, but because of what I knew she didn't know. The truth I'd been carrying for months, the secret that would change everything. You see, by that point, I'd already spent over $15,000 on Autumn's wedding. I had taken time off work, sacrificed weekends, and poured my heart into making her day perfect. And now, I was being told I was the problem, that I was ruining everything. But let me take you back to where this all began. Back when things were different. Back when I actually believed family meant unconditional love and support. Autumn and I weren't just sisters. We were soulmates. I was 7 years old when she was born, and I still remember that moment in the hospital when the nurse placed her in my arms for the first time. She was this tiny, perfect little person, and I looked down at her and whispered, "I'm going to take care of you forever." And I meant it with every fiber of my being. Growing up, we were inseparable. When Autumn had nightmares, she'd crawl into my bed, and I'd tell her stories until she fell back asleep. When she was nervous about her first day of kindergarten, I walked her to her classroom and promised I'd be waiting for her when school ended. When she got her heart broken for the first time. At 16, I drove across town at midnight with ice cream and tissues. We had this sacred tradition that started when she was about 5 years old. Every Sunday morning, we'd wake up before our parents and sneak into the kitchen like little conspirators. I'd make her pancakes from scratch, and they were absolutely terrible. Burned on the bottom, raw in the middle, shaped like abstract art projects. But Autumn would sit at that kitchen table and eat every single bite, telling me they were the best pancakes in the world. "You're the best big sister ever, Cassie," she'd say with syrup dripping down her chin. And I believed her. Because in those moments, making those awful pancakes in our quiet kitchen, I felt like I had a purpose. I was Autumn's protector, her champion, her person. That bond carried us through everything. High school drama college applications, family fights, career changes. No matter what was happening in our lives, we had each other. We were the Morrison sisters, and nothing could come between us. So when Oliver proposed to Autumn last spring on a beach in California, and she called me crying happy tears before she even called our parents, I knew this was going to be the most important project of my life. Not just helping plan a wedding, but being part of the most magical day in my little sister's life. I remember that phone call like it was yesterday. I was at my apartment working late on a client presentation when my phone rang. Cassie. Oh my God. Cassie, he did it. He actually did it. I could barely understand her through the tears and excitement, but I knew immediately what had happened. My baby sister was engaged. "Tell me everything, I said, abandoning my laptop and settling in for what I knew would be a 2-hour conversation. She told me about the sunset, the speech Oliver had prepared, the way her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the ring. And then she said something that made my heart swell with pride and purpose. "Cassie, I want you to be my maid of honor. I can't imagine doing any of this without you. Will you help me plan the most beautiful wedding ever?" Of course I said yes. How could I not? This was Autumn. This was my person. This was what I'd been preparing for my entire life as her big sister. I had such beautiful visions of what the next few months would look like. Us spending weekends, touring venues, tasting cakes, and trying on dresses. Late-night phone calls discussing color schemes and flower arrangements. Sister bonding elevated to an art form. What I didn't anticipate, what I never could have imagined, was how quickly those dreams would turn into a nightmare. How the person I trusted most in the world would slowly, systematically start treating me like a stranger. How my own mother would orchestrate a campaign to push me out of the very wedding I was funding. And the most devastating part, I let it happen. I stood by and watched as my relationship with Autumn crumbled, convincing myself that if I just kept giving more, kept trying harder, kept being more understanding, everything would go back to normal. I kept writing checks and making excuses. I kept showing up and getting shut out. I kept believing that family meant something even when my family was showing me otherwise. But every person has a breaking point. Every heart has a limit to how much it can take before it demands the truth. Mine was about to come crashing down in the most devastating and unexpected way possible. The moment Autumn said yes to Oliver's proposal, I went into what I can only describe as full big sister overdrive. And I mean full overdrive. Within 24 hours, I had created 3 different spreadsheets, started 5 Pinterest boards, and compiled a list of every wedding vendor within a 50-mile radius. This wasn't just any wedding we were planning. This was my baby sister's wedding. The little girl who used to practice walking down our hallway in mom's high heels, pretending to be a bride. The teenager who used to tear pages out of bridal magazines and hide them under her mattress. This was Autumn's moment, and I was going to make sure it was absolutely perfect. I threw myself into research like it was my full-time job. I spent my lunch breaks calling venues, my evenings comparing catering menus, and my weekends driving all over the city to scout locations. I created comparison charts for everything from photographers to florists to cake designers. I even made a timeline that mapped out every single detail from engagement to honeymoon. Within the first month, I'd already put down deposits on 3 different venues because I wanted Autumn to have options. Real options, not just whatever was available last minute. The country club with the gorgeous gardens, $1,500 deposit, the historic mansion downtown, $2,000, the lakeside pavilion that reminded us both of something out of a fairy tale, another $1,200. I didn't think twice about any of it. This is what family does. Right. You show up. You support. You make dreams come true, no matter what it costs. I took personal days off work to drive Autumn to venue tours. I rearranged my entire schedule around vendor meetings. When she got overwhelmed looking at invitation designs, I stayed up until 3 in the morning, creating custom mock-ups on my laptop, trying different fonts and layouts, until I found something that captured her vision perfectly. And Autumn seemed so grateful for all of it. She'd text me at random times throughout the day just to say thank you. She'd call me her wedding planning angel and tell people I was the most amazing sister in the world. For those first few weeks, it felt like everything I'd ever dreamed of. We were a team, just like when we were kids, making those terrible Sunday morning pancakes. I remember one particular afternoon when we were sitting in my apartment, surrounded by fabric samples and flower catalogs. Autumn looked over at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Cassie, I don't know how I got so lucky to have you as my sister. I can't imagine doing any of this without you." That moment felt like pure magic, like all those years of taking care of her, protecting her, putting her needs first had led to this perfect partnership. We were planning her dream wedding together, and it was everything I'd hoped it would be. But then everything started to shift so gradually at first that I almost didn't notice. It started when Mom suggested bringing in Fiona to help with the planning. Fiona Mitchell, Mom's college roommate and best friend for over 30 years. She was also a professional event coordinator who'd built quite a reputation for herself, planning high-end weddings and corporate events around the city. On paper, it made perfect sense. More expertise, more industry connections, more hands to make sure everything went smoothly. Fiona knew vendors I'd never heard of, had relationships with people who could get us better deals, and had the kind of experience that only comes from planning hundreds of events. "It'll be so much easier with Fiona helping," Mom said during one of our family dinners. "She can take some of the pressure off you, Cassie. You've been working so hard." At the time, I thought it was sweet that Mom was worried about me being overwhelmed. I thought she was trying to help. I had no idea she was setting the stage for something much more calculated. The first sign that things were changing came during what was supposed to be a simple planning meeting at Mom's house. Autumn, Mom, Fiona, and I were sitting around the dining room table discussing flower arrangements. I'd spent the entire previous week researching local florists, comparing their portfolios, and putting together a presentation of options that would work within Autumn's budget and vision. I was excited to share what I'd found. I'd discovered this amazing florist who specialized in the romantic garden-style arrangements Autumn had been dreaming about. Her work was stunning, her prices were reasonable, and she had availability for Autumn's date. But before I could even finish presenting my first option, Fiona jumped in. "Oh, honey, you don't need to worry about all that research. I already reached out to Marcus at Bella Flora. He's giving us the family discount, and he's absolutely the best in the city. It's all handled." Just like that. All handled. Weeks of my time, hours of careful research, multiple phone calls and consultations, dismissed in 10 seconds. I looked at Autumn expecting her to acknowledge the work I'd put in. Maybe ask to see what I'd found before making a final decision. But she just smiled brightly and said, "Oh wow, Fiona, that's amazing. Thank you so much for taking care of that." That was the moment I felt the first crack in our perfect sister partnership. It was small, barely noticeable, like a hairline fracture in a piece of glass. But it was there, and something in my stomach told me it was about to grow into something much bigger. "What about the florist I found?" I asked quietly. "Should we at least look at her portfolio before deciding?" Mom waved her hand dismissively. "Cassie, sweetheart, Fiona has been doing this for 20 years. If she says Marcus is the best, then he's the best. We trust her judgment. We trust her judgment. Not my research, not my hours of work, not my careful consideration of Autumn's vision and budget. Fiona's judgment." I watched as Autumn nodded in agreement, and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't anger exactly, it was more like confusion mixed with a deep, uncomfortable realization that the dynamic I thought we'd established was already changing. That night, I went home and told Nathan about the meeting. He listened carefully, the way he always does, and then asked a question that would haunt me for weeks to come. "Cass, when Fiona took over the flower decision, how did that make you feel?" "Like I was wasting my time," I admitted. "Like all that research didn't matter." "And what did Autumn do when that happened?" I thought about it for a moment. "Nothing. She just went along with it." Nathan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Maybe it was just a one-time thing. But keep an eye on the pattern, okay? You deserve to have your efforts acknowledged." I should have listened to him. I should have trusted that uncomfortable feeling in my stomach. Because that meeting wasn't a one-time thing. It was the beginning of a systematic campaign to push me out of my sister's wedding, orchestrated by the person I trusted most in the world. But I didn't see it coming. I was too busy trying to be the perfect sister, the supportive daughter, the accommodating family member. I was too busy making excuses and giving everyone the benefit of the doubt. I had no idea that while I was planning the perfect wedding for Autumn, someone else was planning the perfect way to destroy everything we'd built together. That crack I mentioned, it was about to become a full-blown earthquake. 2 weeks after the flower incident, I got a text from Autumn that made my blood run cold. "OMG, Cassie, Mom booked the Riverside Manor for the reception. Can you believe it?" I stared at that text for a solid 5 minutes. The Riverside Manor, the same venue I'd put a deposit on 3 months earlier. The same venue where Autumn and I had walked through the gardens together, where she'd grabbed my arm and whispered, "This is it. This is where I want to marry Oliver." But here's the thing that really got me. Mom hadn't just booked the venue. She'd booked it for a completely different date. A date that worked better for Fiona's schedule. When I called Autumn to ask what happened, her response was devastating in its casualness. "Oh, Mom said Fiona could get us a better deal, and the new date actually works better for Oliver's family." Isn't that great? No mention of the $1,500 I'd already put down. No acknowledgement that we'd chosen this place together. No recognition that the date change meant I'd have to cancel my planned vacation time and rearrange my entire schedule. I should have spoken up then. I should have said something. But I didn't. Because that's not who I am. I'm the peacekeeper, the one who makes things work, the one who swallows her feelings to keep everyone else happy. So instead I said, "That's wonderful, Autumn. I'm so happy for you." And that lie, that became the foundation for everything that followed. Over the next few weeks, I watched as Mom and Fiona formed this impenetrable alliance. They had their own group chat, their own meetings, their own inside jokes about wedding planning. And slowly, methodically, I found myself being pushed to the outside. It wasn't dramatic. There was no big confrontation, no harsh words. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. A forgotten invitation here, a last-minute change there. Decisions being made without me, then presented as done deals. The worst part was watching Autumn go along with it all. My baby sister, who used to come to me with every problem, every decision, every doubt, was now looking to Mom and Fiona for guidance. And I was becoming an afterthought. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that once the stress of planning died down, things would go back to normal, that Autumn still needed me even if she wasn't showing it. But deep down, I was starting to realize something that would haunt me for months to come. I wasn't being pushed out of the wedding planning. I was being erased from it entirely. If being erased from the planning was painful, what happened next was absolutely devastating. I found out about the dress appointment from Sarah, my college roommate who works at the bridal boutique downtown. She called me on a Tuesday afternoon, excited and bubbly. "Cassie, I can't wait to see you this weekend at Autumn's dress appointment. I've already pulled some gorgeous options for her to try." The silence on my end must have lasted forever because Sarah's tone completely changed. "Wait, you're coming, right? You're the maid of honor." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. "I think there might be some confusion, Sarah. I haven't heard anything about a dress appointment." The awkwardness in her voice was unbearable. "Oh no, oh Cassie, I'm so sorry. Your mom booked it last week. She said the whole bridal party would be there." The whole bridal party. Everyone except me. I hung up the phone and just sat there in my car for 20 minutes trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was deliberate. I called Autumn immediately. When she picked up, I could hear voices in the background. Mom's voice, Fiona's voice. They were probably planning something else without me. "Hey, Autumn, Sarah just called me about the dress appointment this weekend. I think there might be some confusion about the time." The pause before she answered told me everything I needed to know. "Oh, Cassie. Yeah, about that. Mom thought it might be better to keep the group smaller. You know how overwhelming dress shopping can be. But don't worry, I'll FaceTime you when I find the one." FaceTime me, like I was some distant relative instead of her sister. Instead of the person who'd dreamed about this moment with her since we were kids. "Autumn, I'm your maid of honor. I should be there." I know. And you will be. At the next appointment. This is just the first round." But we both knew there wouldn't be a next appointment for me. After that, everything changed. The texts from Autumn went from long, excited messages to short, formal updates. "Flowers are handled. Cake is booked. Thanks for asking." It was like talking to a stranger, but here's the part that still makes me angry when I think about it. Despite being pushed out of every decision, despite being excluded from every important moment, I was still expected to pay for everything. The honeymoon to Italy, that was on me. $4,500 for 10 days in Tuscany, because, "Cassie, you're so good with travel planning." The photographer everyone loved, I wrote that check too. $3,000 because, "You have such a good eye for these things." The string quartet for the ceremony, the upgraded catering package, the premium bar service. All me, all my credit card, all my savings account. I was funding a wedding I was being systematically excluded from. And the worst part, everyone just expected it. Like it was my job to pay and their job to plan. I felt like I was disappearing. Like I was becoming invisible in my own family. The more I gave, the less I seemed to matter. The more I tried to help, the more I was pushed away. And through it all, I kept quiet. I kept writing checks. I kept pretending everything was fine. Because that's what good sisters do, right? They sacrifice, they endure, they smile through the pain. But even the strongest person has a breaking point, and mine was coming faster than I realized. That breaking point I mentioned, it came on a Sunday afternoon that I'll never forget. I'd reached my limit. After weeks of being excluded, ignored, and treated like an ATM, I decided it was time to have an honest conversation with my family. Not an argument, not a confrontation, just a calm adult discussion about what was happening. I drove to Mom's house around 2 in the afternoon. I'd called ahead to make sure everyone would be there. Autumn, Mom, even Oliver, I wanted to clear the air once and for all. When I walked into the living room, I immediately knew something was wrong. They were all sitting there waiting for me, not in the casual family Sunday way, in the intervention way, like they'd been discussing me before I arrived. I sat down across from them and took a deep breath. I think we need to talk about what's been happening with the wedding planning. Before I could even finish my sentence, Mom cut me off. Actually, Cassie, we've been talking about that too, and we think maybe you should step back a little. Step back, like I hadn't already been pushed so far back I was practically invisible. Step back from what exactly I'm barely involved as it is. That's when Autumn spoke up and her words hit me like a physical blow. Cassie, you have to understand. You can be a lot sometimes. You get so intense about things and it's been stressing me out. Intense. I was intense for caring. I was intense for trying to help. I was intense for wanting to be part of my sister's wedding. But Mom's next words were the ones that shattered me completely. We all agreed you're too much. The wedding planning should be fun, not stressful. And honestly, Cassie, you make everything about you. The room went dead silent. I looked around at their faces, searching for someone to disagree, someone to defend me. Oliver looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Autumn was staring at her hands, and Mom just sat there like she'd delivered the most reasonable statement in the world. But then, I noticed Fiona in the corner, and something in her expression caught my attention. She looked uncomfortable. Not uncomfortable like Oliver, who was just trying to stay out of family drama. Uncomfortable like someone who knew something she shouldn't. I make everything about me, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. I've paid for half this wedding. I've spent months planning details that you've overruled. I've rearranged my entire life around Autumn's needs. How exactly have I made any of this about me? That's exactly what we're talking about, Mom said, her voice getting sharper. You act like because you're helping financially, you should get to control everything. Control everything. I hadn't controlled anything. I hadn't even been consulted on anything. I stood up slowly, feeling like the room was spinning around me. These people, my family, had ambushed me. They'd sat me down like some kind of problem that needed to be solved, and their solution was to gaslight me into believing that my love and support were somehow toxic. I think I should go, I said quietly. No one tried to stop me. No one called my name as I walked to the door. No one followed me to my car. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Fiona in my rearview mirror. She was standing at the front window watching me leave, and for just a moment she looked like she wanted to run after me. But she didn't. I made it 3 blocks before I had to pull over because I was shaking so hard I couldn't drive. I sat in that parking lot for an hour trying to process what had just happened. My family had declared me too much. Too intense. Too controlling. For loving my sister. For wanting to be part of her wedding. For trying to help in the only ways I knew how. And the most devastating part. They'd all agreed. Every single one of them had sat in that room and decided that I was the problem. But as I sat there replaying every word, every expression, one thing kept nagging at me. Fiona's face. The way she'd looked when Mom said those words. The way she'd watched me leave. Something wasn't right. And I was about to find out exactly what that something was. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I completely fell apart. Nathan found me on my apartment floor at midnight, still in the same clothes from that afternoon, just staring at the wall. I'd been sitting there for hours trying to make sense of what had happened, trying to figure out how loving someone could be twisted into being too much. Cass, talk to me. What happened? So I told him everything, every detail, every word, every look. And as I spoke, I watched his face change from confusion to anger to something that looked like heartbreak. Baby, that's not normal family behavior. That's not how people who love you treat you. But that was the problem. I was starting to question whether they did love me, or if they'd ever loved me the way I loved them. The next morning, I called Monique. We'd been best friends since freshman year of college, and she knew my family almost as well as I did. If anyone could help me make sense of this, it was her. They said what? Monique's voice went from concerned to furious in about 2 seconds. Cassie, honey, they manipulated you. What they did was emotional abuse. You know that, right? I did know that. Deep down, I knew, but hearing someone else say it out loud made it real in a way that terrified me. We talked for 2 hours. Monique helped me see patterns I'd been blind to my whole life. The way my feelings were always dismissed. The way my contributions were expected but never acknowledged. The way I was always the one who had to be understanding, flexible, accommodating. I was starting to feel a little stronger, a little clearer when my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello. Cassie, it's Fiona. My heart stopped. Of all the people I expected to hear from, Fiona was at the bottom of the list. I need to see you. There are things you need to know. Things about your mother and what's really been happening. We met at a coffee shop downtown an hour later. Fiona looked terrible. Like she hadn't slept. Like she'd been crying. I can't do this anymore, she said before I even sat down. I can't watch what's happening to you and stay quiet. What do you mean? Fiona took a shaky breath. Your mother has been lying to everyone. About you, about the wedding planning, about everything. The world tilted on its axis. What are you talking about? Cassie, your mother has been telling Autumn that you don't want to be involved. She's been intercepting your messages, changing plans behind your back, and then telling everyone that you're okay with it. I felt like I was going to be sick. That dress appointment, your mother specifically told the bridal shop not to contact you. She said you were too busy with work and didn't want to be bothered. But that's not true. I know it's not true, and I should have spoken up sooner, but Maggie is my oldest friend, and I thought maybe there was some family dynamic I didn't understand. Fiona pulled out her phone and showed me screenshots of text messages. Messages between her and my mother. Messages that made my blood run cold. She's been orchestrating all of this, Cassie. The exclusions, the last-minute changes, even yesterday's intervention. She planned that whole thing. She told me she was worried about you being too involved, but now I realize she was just trying to push you out. But why? Why would she do that? Fiona's answer was so quiet I almost missed it. Because she's jealous of how much Autumn loves you. She's always been jealous of your relationship with your sister, and she saw the wedding as her chance to finally be the most important woman in Autumn's life. Everything clicked into place. Every cruel word, every exclusion, every moment I'd been made to feel like I was too much. It had all been calculated. It had all been planned. My mother had systematically destroyed my relationship with my sister to feed her own ego, and she used my love for Autumn as the weapon against me. I sat there in that coffee shop, feeling like my entire life had been a lie. But for the first time in months, I also felt something else. Clarity, because now I knew exactly what I was dealing with. And I knew exactly what I had to do. What Fiona told me next changed everything I thought I knew about my family. Cassie, I have to show you something else, but I need you to promise me you won't do anything rash. She pulled out a folder from her purse. Inside were screenshots, printed emails, and what looked like pages of handwritten notes. Your mother has been intercepting your communication with Autumn. Not just ignoring your input, but actively changing your messages. My hands were shaking as I took the papers from her. The first screenshot showed a text thread between my mom and Fiona. Mom had written, Cassie said she's fine with us handling the catering decisions. She's too busy at work to deal with the vendor meetings anyway. But I never said that, I whispered. I know, that's why I started documenting everything. Look at this one. The next screenshot showed Mom telling the photographer, Cassie won't be at the engagement shoot. She said she doesn't want to intrude on Autumn's moment. I remembered that day. I'd been so hurt when Autumn told me the photographer said I wasn't needed. But I never said I didn't want to be there. Fiona, how long has this been going on? Months, Cassie. Since the beginning. Every time you tried to be involved, your mother found a way to make it seem like you didn't want to be. But then Fiona said something that made my stomach drop. Oliver knows. What do you mean, Oliver knows? He came to me 2 weeks ago. He was confused because Autumn kept telling him how hurt she was that you were pulling away from the wedding. But Oliver had been getting your texts about vendor payments and timeline questions. He realized the stories didn't match up. That's when my phone rang. It was Oliver. Cassie, can we meet? I think there are some things you need to hear. An hour later, the three of us were sitting in Oliver's car in an empty parking lot. He looked miserable. I should have said something sooner. I thought maybe there was just some miscommunication. But after yesterday, after seeing how upset you were, I went through Autumn's phone. He handed me his phone, showing me screenshots of text messages between Autumn and my mother. Your mom has been forwarding Autumn-altered versions of your texts. Look at this. I saw a message that was supposedly from me. Tell Mom I'm fine with whatever she decides about the flowers. I trust her judgment more than mine anyway. Oliver, I never sent that text. I know, because I have the original message you sent to Autumn right here. He scrolled to another screenshot. My actual message read, Hey Autumn, I found 3 amazing florists who specialize in the style you want. Want to set up appointments this weekend to check them out together. I stared at the 2 messages side by side, one showing enthusiasm and initiative, the other showing complete disinterest. My mother had literally rewritten my words to fit her narrative. There's more, Oliver said quietly. Your mom has been telling Autumn that you've been complaining about the costs, saying you feel taken advantage of. But that's the opposite of what I've been saying. I know, but Autumn believes it. She's been feeling guilty about the money you've spent, and your mom has been using that guilt to convince her that you resent helping. The pieces were falling into place like the most devastating puzzle I'd ever seen. My mother hadn't just excluded me from the wedding planning. She'd systematically destroyed my relationship with Autumn by lying to both of us. That night, I went home and did something I'd never done before. I went through every bank statement, every email, every receipt from the past 6 months. I documented everything I'd paid for every message I'd sent, every attempt I'd made to be involved. The evidence was overwhelming. Nearly $15,000 in wedding expenses, dozens of thoughtful messages and suggestions, hours of research and planning, all while being told I was too much, too controlling, too involved. I also found something else. Voice recordings on my phone from conversations with Autumn, including one from 3 weeks ago where she'd said, Cassie, I don't know what I'd do without you. You're the best sister anyone could ask for. 3 weeks later, she'd sat in Mom's living room and agreed that I was too much. The manipulation was so complete, so calculated that it took my breath away. My mother had weaponized my love for my sister against both of us. She'd turned my generosity into evidence of control. She'd turned my enthusiasm into proof of selfishness. But now, I had something I didn't have before. I had the truth, and I had evidence to back it up. The question was, what was I going to do with it? I spent 3 days deciding how to handle what I'd learned. Part of me wanted to storm into Mom's house with all the evidence and have it out with her. But that's exactly what she'd expect. Drama, emotion, chaos she could use to paint me as unstable. Instead, I chose something more powerful. The truth delivered calmly. I texted Oliver and asked him to set up a coffee meeting with Autumn. Neutral ground, no family home dynamics, no mom hovering in the background. Just the three of us. And the facts. Autumn walked into that coffee shop looking nervous. She kept glancing around like she expected mom to appear from behind a menu. She sat across from me, and for the first time in months, I really looked at my sister. She looked exhausted, stressed, like the joy had been sucked out of what should have been the happiest time of her life. Autumn, I said gently, I need to show you something. But before I do, I want you to know that none of this is your fault. I slid the folder across the table, the same one Fiona had shown me, plus all the evidence I'd gathered. What is this? It's proof that we've both been lied to. Autumn opened the folder and I watched her face change as she read. Confusion, first, then recognition, then something that looked like horror. Cassie, these text messages. These aren't what you sent me. I know. She kept reading, and with each page I could see her world shifting. The message comparisons, the screenshots from Fiona, the bank statements showing my payments. $15,000. Her voice was barely a whisper. $15,347 to be exact. Oliver reached over and took her hand. Autumn, your mom has been manipulating both of you. She's been changing Cassie's messages to make it seem like she didn't want to be involved. Autumn looked up at me and I saw my little sister again. Not the stranger who'd been treating me like an outsider, but the girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. Cassie, I thought you didn't want to help anymore. Mom kept telling me you were feeling overwhelmed, that you thought I was asking too much of you. When have I ever thought you were asking too much of me? That's when she broke. Never. You've never made me feel like a burden. Not once in my entire life. The tears started flowing. Oh my God, Cassie. What have I done? What have we done to you? You didn't do anything, Autumn. We were both played. She shook her head. No, I should have known. I should have questioned it when you started acting different. But Mom was so convincing, and she kept saying you were stressed about work and that you needed space. What else did she tell you? Autumn wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. She said you were complaining about the money, that you felt taken advantage of. She said you told her you wished you'd never offered to help pay for anything. Each revelation was like a knife twist. Autumn, I never said any of those things. I've been honored to help with your wedding. It's been the highlight of my year. I know that now. I should have known it then. She looked down at the evidence again. The dress appointment. Mom told me you said you were too busy to come. But you would never miss something like that. I would have crawled through broken glass to be at that appointment with you. That's when Autumn said something that broke my heart, all over again. Cassie, I've been so lonely planning this wedding. I kept waiting for you to be excited with me, to want to be involved, and when Mom said you were pulling back, I thought maybe you didn't care anymore. I never stopped caring. I never stopped wanting to be your sister. Oliver, who'd been quietly listening, finally spoke up. There's something else you both need to know. Your mom didn't just manipulate the messages. She's been telling people that Cassie is jealous of the wedding that she's trying to take over because she's not married yet. Autumn's face went white. She said she's been painting Cassie as the problem to justify pushing her out. And she's been so convincing that everyone believed it. The three of us sat there in silence for a moment, processing the magnitude of what had happened. My mother had orchestrated an entire campaign to destroy my relationship with my sister, and she'd almost succeeded. Finally, Autumn looked at me with tears in her eyes. How do we fix this? How do we fix what she's done? For the first time in months, I felt hope. Because my sister was asking the right question. Not, how do we manage Mom or how do we keep the peace? But how do we fix this? We start by being honest with each other from now on. No more filtered communication through Mom. No more assuming we know what the other person is thinking. Autumn nodded. And we confront her together. She needs to know that we know what she did. Are you ready for that conversation? She took Oliver's hand and looked at me with a determination I hadn't seen from her in months. I'm ready to get my sister back. The confrontation with Mom happened 3 days before the wedding. Autumn and I walked into her house together, armed with evidence, and a united front she hadn't seen coming. I won't lie to you, it was brutal. Mom denied everything at first, then tried to gaslight us, then finally broke down and admitted she'd been protecting the family from unnecessary drama. Her words, not mine. She never actually apologized. Not really, but she agreed to step back and let Autumn and me handle the final wedding details together. More importantly, she agreed to stay in her lane on the wedding day. And that brings us to the morning I'd dreamed about for months, but thought I'd lost forever. I stood in the bridal suite at the Riverside Manor holding my sister's wedding dress. The same dress I'd been excluded from helping her choose. The same dress I'd seen for the first time in photos on Instagram like a stranger instead of her maid of honor. But I was there now, finally rightfully there. Cassie, can you help me with the buttons? Autumn's voice was soft, nervous. We were both walking on eggshells, still learning how to be sisters again after months of manipulation and hurt. But we were trying. As I fastened each tiny pearl button up the back of her dress, I felt like I was putting together more than just her wedding outfit. I was piecing back together our relationship one small moment at a time. You look beautiful, Autumn. Oliver is going to lose his mind when he sees you. She turned around and looked at me in the mirror. We were both trying not to cry and ruin our makeup. Cassie, I know I can't undo what happened. I know I should have questioned things sooner, should have trusted my instincts about you. Hey, we're not doing this today. Today is about celebrating you and Oliver. Everything else can wait. But the truth was, I was still guarded, still hurt. Forgiveness is a process, not a moment, and we both knew we had a long way to go. Mom showed up to the bridal suite exactly when she was supposed to, with exactly the role she'd been assigned. She helped with final touch-ups, took some photos, and then stepped back. No drama, no power plays, no attempts to center herself in Autumn's moment. It was the first time in months I'd seen my mother behave like a normal mother of the bride instead of a puppet master. The ceremony was everything Autumn had dreamed of. The flowers I'd researched months ago, the photographer I'd hired, the string quartet I'd paid for. All the details I'd contributed to but been shut out of seeing come together. As I walked down the aisle ahead of Autumn, I felt a complicated mix of emotions. Joy for my sister, who looked radiant. Sadness for the months of sisterhood we'd lost. Pride in the wedding we'd ultimately created together. And yes, a little bit of anger that it had taken a near destruction of our relationship to get here. But when I saw Autumn's face as she walked toward Oliver, none of that mattered. This was her moment. Her joy. Her new beginning. And I got to be part of it. During the reception, something beautiful happened. Autumn pulled me aside between the first dance and the cake cutting. Cassie, I have something for you. She handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a delicate necklace with 2 interlocking hearts. I bought this the day after we had coffee. I wanted you to know that no matter what Mom did, no matter how confused I got, you've always been the most important person in my life. You're not just my sister, you're my best friend, and I'm never letting anyone come between us again. That's when I finally cried. Happy tears this time. The rest of the evening felt like healing in real time. We laughed together, danced together, and for the first time in months, I felt like I belonged in my own family again. Mom kept her distance, playing her assigned role without overstepping. Dad, who'd been mostly absent from the drama, told me he was proud of how I'd handled everything. Even some of the extended family commented on how happy Autumn and I looked together. As the night wound down, and Autumn and Oliver left for their honeymoon, she hugged me tight. Thank you for not giving up on us. Thank you for fighting for our relationship, even when I couldn't see what was happening. That's what sisters do, Autumn. We fight for each other. But as I drove home that night, still in my maid of honor dress, I knew this wasn't a fairy tale ending. We'd taken important steps toward healing, but trust would have to be rebuilt slowly. Boundaries would have to be maintained, and I'd learned some hard truths about family that I could never unlearn. The little girl who used to make terrible pancakes for her baby sister was gone. In her place was a woman who knew her worth, who wouldn't accept manipulation, disguised as love, and who understood that sometimes the people you love most can hurt you the deepest. But it was also a woman who believed in second chances, who knew that real love is worth fighting for, and who had just gotten her sister back. 6 months after the wedding, I found myself sitting in a therapist's office with my entire family. It wasn't my idea. Autumn had insisted, and surprisingly, even Dad had agreed we needed professional help to work through what had happened. Mom was the most reluctant participant you can imagine. She sat in that chair like she was being held hostage, arms crossed, answering questions with the bare minimum, but slowly, very slowly, she started to open up. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she said during our fourth session. "I just wanted to be needed. I wanted to be important in my daughter's life." It wasn't the apology I'd been hoping for, but it was the beginning of understanding. Dr. Martinez, our therapist, helped us see patterns that went back years. Mom's need to control, my tendency to people-please, Autumn's struggle to set boundaries. The breakthrough came in session 7 when Mom finally admitted, "I was jealous of how much Autumn loved Cassie. I felt like I was losing my daughter to her sister." That was the moment I realized my mother wasn't evil. She was broken. That didn't excuse what she'd done, but it helped me understand it. Recovery isn't linear. Some weeks we'd make real progress, and others we'd backslide into old patterns. But the important thing was that we were all trying. We were all committed to being better. Autumn and I started having weekly sister dinners, just the two of us. No partners, no parents, no distractions. We talked about everything and nothing. We rebuilt our trust one conversation at a time. And then, on a Tuesday evening in March, Nathan changed everything again. He proposed right there in our apartment, no grand gestures or public displays. Just him, me, and a ring he'd been carrying around for 2 months waiting for the right moment. "Cassie, you're the strongest, most loving person I know, and I want to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that love." Of course I said yes, but as we started planning our engagement party, I did something the old me never would have done. I set boundaries, clear, non-negotiable boundaries. "Mom, I love you, and I want you to be part of this. But Nathan and I are planning our wedding together. We'll ask for help when we need it, but all final decisions go through us. Not you, not Fiona, not anyone else." She didn't like it at first. There were a few tense conversations and one minor meltdown, but eventually she adjusted. She had to. The most beautiful part of planning my engagement party was working with Autumn. She insisted on helping with everything, and this time it felt like true partnership. We planned the menu together, chose decorations together, and even argued about the guest list together. Normal sister stuff. At the party itself, Mom gave a speech that surprised everyone. "I want to apologize to my daughters, especially to Cassie, for losing sight of what really mattered. Family isn't about control or manipulation. It's about love and support, and I'm still learning how to do that better." It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As I looked around that room at all the people who loved us, I realized something profound. The woman who'd been systematically excluded from her sister's wedding was now surrounded by people celebrating her engagement. The woman who'd been told she was too much was now confident in exactly who she was. I thought about that scared, hurt girl who'd sat in a parking lot 6 months earlier, shaking after being emotionally ambushed by her own family. She felt like a different person. Not because she'd changed who she was, but because she'd finally learned to value who she was. Nathan squeezed my hand and whispered, "What are you thinking about?" "I'm thinking about how sometimes the worst things that happen to you end up being the best things that happen to you." He smiled. "How's that?" "Because sometimes the toughest fights give you the greatest gifts. They give you your true self." And that's exactly what happened to me. I lost my family for a while, but I found myself. I discovered that I'm not too much. I'm not too intense. I'm not too controlling. I'm someone who loves deeply, fights for what matters, and refuses to settle for less than I deserve. The little girl, who made terrible pancakes for her baby sister, grew up to be a woman who knows her worth. And that woman, she's planning a wedding where she gets to be the bride surrounded by people who celebrate her exactly as she is. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's just living well, loving fully, and refusing to let anyone dim your light. And if you're listening to this story because you recognize yourself in it, because you've been made to feel like you're too much or not enough, I want you to know something. You're not the problem. You never were the problem. And you deserve people in your life who see your love as a gift, not a burden. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. What do you think about my decision to set those boundaries? Have you ever dealt with family manipulation like this? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss my latest videos. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.